Reflections with theologian Father James Bacik, lecturer and campus minister at the University of Toledo.
If we can try to put that together, we would say there's sort of an ambivalence on this, that it cuts two ways. One is we want to drive in our own cars and be our own person and accomplish on our own. On the other hand, we often feel the value of teamwork and associations.
Today on Reflections, Father Bacik talks with Sister Geraldine Nowak, who is a pastoral associate at St. Ignatius Parish in Oregon, Ohio. The topic of this week's Reflections is community life, authority, and dialogue. And now, here is Father Bacik.
Well, Geraldine, I want to talk a little with you about community, and one reason I want to do that is because you have some experience along that line of being a member of a religious community. But I must say to begin with that it seems to me the question of community is not just, first of all, a religious question. It's a human question. It's a societal question, and part of it arises out of the great individualism that we have in our country. You know, individualism is rampant, and we have sort of a tradition that we're going to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, and that there is a rugged kind of individualism that we expect people to have, that people who succeed in the society sort of keep their relationships fluid, don't get themselves boxed in, they keep a lot of freedom, and are able then to do their own thing. So there's a whole lot of strains of thought and feeling in the country that really suggests that individualism is the way to go. You're going to choose your own values, work out your own way, pull your own strings, as the popular book says, and that's how you'll make it in the world. Now, to begin to talk about community, then, it seems to me to be a way to try to deal with that kind of individualism. But let's just stay with the individualism for a minute. Do you want to comment on that at all?
Well, I think that's a good place to start, because you're really sort of tapping into the American experience, and that all of what you mentioned certainly seems to have been experienced by, some, in, let's say, 30 years ago, growing up, some of those elements were there. And I guess that it also at times becomes, very American, because we have the tendency, the I, the me, all of that, and that, that individualism is really stressed a lot. And I suppose that's the independent part of that journey. And then to look on the flip side of that, I think within our culture too, I remember reading in one of your articles where you had mentioned something about Michael Novak, and he talks about Americans that they're also joiners. And so, on the one hand, we have this individualism, we have this thing about joiners, and I think that plays out really, to put it in very simple, plain words, that there are times that we really want to do our own thing, but something is lacking, and we feel this need that only really together can we really accomplish something. And I think that gets played out, just all over, just watching TV, the individuals versus the groups that get things done. So I think that's a good, healthy tension, and that specifically is the American experience.
You mentioned Michael Novak, and that does bring back his study of de Tocqueville, who came in the 1830s and visited the United States and wrote the famous work Democracy in America. And one of his notions was that when he watched Americans, he said what they always do is form associations when they want to get something done. If they want to build a library, they get a library association. Or today we say we get committees organized to get things done. So we have a certain sense of teamwork in the United States. We are that melting pot in one sense, or that mosaic of people who have come together. And I think it is true that a lot of us learn that in sports, but it's also learned at times on the job or in the family setting or in the neighborhood, that if you work together, you can get the job done quicker or more efficiently, more effectively. And so we aren't simply individuals. I think that has to be factored in. I mean, it's common today to say we are a nation of individualists, but I believe that there's also that associational principle that's at work, and you can see it all over the place, and people still do combine, go together to accomplish things. You see this sometimes when people move. Their friends will all come and help them move. I think that is still somewhat common. Or we have the great great Amish experience of a barn being burned down and then all the neighbors come and build the barn. I think that stands as sort of another ideal in the culture. We look at it and say, oh, that's wonderful. Let's do more of that kind of thing. So if we can try to put that together, we would say there's sort of an ambivalence on this. It cuts two ways. One is we want to drive in our own cars and be our own person and accomplish on our own. On the other hand, we often feel the value of teamwork and associations.
Seems like the ambivalence is there if we think of it in an either-or category, but that ambivalence gets softened and lessened when we think of both and. And I think that relates more to the experience that, on the one hand, we are individualistic, but on the other hand, we do have the need for others. And whether that's a sociological perspective or what, I guess for me it gets reduced to that's who we are as human. We were meant to be social, and that it's more natural for us to join together and to accomplish things, and that the no man is an island. We need each other.
I would, you're looking for the rooting of it. I mean, I think you can do that philosophically and say that we human beings are social creatures. We are essentially interdependent. We need one another. You can do it from sort of a psychological, developmental stance and saying, well, the youngster, the baby, needs the mother's affection to grow up properly, needs the whole family setting here, that our identity is socialized. That is, we largely know who we are depending on the feedback that people give to us and what role we play in society, and that so you get this more communal social notion in all the disciplines. I think understand that we are not simply by ourselves. We can't walk the path alone, and so that really roots. And then I'd say theologically, what we've got is a sense that God saves us as a member of a people, that we're all made in the image and likeness of God, but because we all have the image of God in us, that means there's a commonness, and that commonness is what draws us together, and we therefore not only need each other, but we have the possibility of contributing to the relationships, of enhancing them. So I think it is built into human nature, and that's why a totally individualistic society isn't going to make it, because it violates one of the primary truths about who we are. We are people who are social by nature. Now, I think to take up that association question, Geraldine, and I like the framework you put it in, because part of it is the idea of getting things done, that is tasks. One of the reasons we come together, it seems to me, is to try to achieve some goals, so that if people need to make the blood program work, they form a committee and they all get together and try to get more people to come and give blood, or the parents of the students in the school are interested in improving the school, so they become members of the PTA and they come and have meetings and try to help the school be a better place. So there's a lot of task orientation involved in coming together. Now, I would say out of that, very often what happens is we get communities formed. And now when I'm using the word community, I'm talking about something that involves a greater degree of intimacy, of sharing, of communication, of shared values. And then out of that, you get face-to-face relationships. We get to know one another. We know how you think and how you react to things, and now we build up a trust level, and now we can work to improve this school because we know we're in it together and we both love our kids, or we wanted the whole thing to work. And so we've got these shared values going that I think begin to form what we might call community. I think it might become more than an association in that way. In other words, I think of association as more impersonal, like we come together and we figure out we have to have a new softball field for our kids to play in, and we need a little league, so we form a committee and someone heads it up, and somebody gets umpires and somebody gets the field, and before long we've got this going, and then we say goodbye. It's all happening. But community has a little richer connotation to it. It implies now a care for one another and a trust, and I think very often that does facilitate getting things done. There is a task connected with it.
That's a nice development of how community happens, and with that we come together because of the task, and then things happen down as you articulated them in the development. And then I guess I'm wondering, well, then how does that? It just doesn't the task just doesn't get done. What are some of the dynamics? And given whatever group there is, I think those things get done because somebody has to be in charge, or leadership has to be there. And when we're talking about leadership, then we're talking about authority, and we're talking about some of those dynamics and how does that get done.
Okay, well, let's explore that then for a while. So what you're saying is that leadership will sort of emerge within a grouping to get things done. Someone will become head of the committee.
I've seen that happen in various ways. It can work that way, that someone emerges. It might be that someone is already appointed. So what I see is we have different styles of authority, and we have different models of leadership in the given group. And I myself prefer when the leader emerges. When the leader emerges, what I find there is a style that's more enabling in its positive and best sense, where enablement means that the gifts of all are going to be used and everybody's going to feel good, and that everybody is giving the best of what they have. So when that leader emerges and it just becomes the natural leader, a real significant thing happens. And I think the significant thing that happens is not only does the task get done, but those then relationships start developing that lead to a different form, and that's where the intimacy starts. To contrast that, another style of leadership I think that could be that someone is appointed the leader, so they have the given authority, and at times, sometimes that might become authoritarian, and I don't know that that's necessarily bad, but it means that maybe many people in that group want that style. And I think the task will emerge, it will be finished, everybody will feel good because they will have a part of it, but I don't know how much of their own gifts were tapped in the sense of the creative sense. And then I think there's, maybe another third model might be where maybe there isn't, the enabling style, or there isn't the authoritarian style. There's one that it's sort of like shared authority. And so maybe a couple people might have it. And I think that that's a difficult one to pull off, but a lot of good things can happen. And I think the exciting thing about that is that given the human family, we all belong in one of those is our best groups, and we function best. And so it's like not one is better than the other. It's for me to know what style of leadership is best for me to operate out of, and, how does that task get done, and then what are the benefits of getting the task done.
So one of the things that you said there in the more participative style, where the leader enables and facilitates and so on, is that people are more likely to contribute their own gifts and talents. They're more likely to take hold of the project. I mean, while you didn't put a value judgment on it, it would seem to me that in today's world, that style of leadership has a much better chance of working than the more authoritarian style, where someone would be appointed and say, this is how the group is going to do. Now, again, it depends a lot on what you're looking for. So I think that style probably relates to efficiency more often. Like, instead of everyone sitting around and spending 2 days trying to figure out what are we supposed to do, one guy comes in and says, here's the task, we have to get this shelter built for the homeless, and we need to accommodate 40 more people here, and we got to get the money, and here's how we're going to get it, and sort of comes and says, well, we're gathered for this task, I know how to get it done, here's what's going to happen, and people sort of sit there and say, well, that's really good, yeah, he's right on target, and they're willing to work on it. Now, I suppose you could see that functioning well when you are very task-oriented. However, at the end of that time, you're not going to have a lot of friendship, probably, and you're not going to have a lot of intimacy or sharing and that sort of thing. On the other hand, when you go through the process and you try to let a leader emerge, and where the leader does a lot of talking and discussing, and where we try to arrive at consensus about what we're going to do as a group, I think people buy into it more. You're more likely to get intimacy, friendship, and deeper sort of sharing. The other one, where you've got two different kinds of leaders, I really don't know. I belong to a parish, and I'm a co-pastor, and that means there's two priests there working, and we have shared duties, and in my mind it works remarkably well, but I talk to people around the country who know about co-pastors and so on. They tell me they almost never work, that there's too many conflicts, and it really can't happen. And I've sort of asked myself over the years, why would ours work as well as it does? And it's always seemed to me it's because each of us who share this authority recognize when the other person is passionate about a particular issue. That if my colleague, I can see that this really matters to him and he wants it done a certain way, maybe even it infringes on my area in a way of responsibility, still I'm more likely to just go along with it because I know it matters a great deal to him. He is passionate and about it, and I sort of think that maybe unconsciously he works the same way with things that matter a lot to me. Now, out of that experience, maybe I learned something about how this authority can work. I mean, I think there's got to be a respect among the leaders if it is rotating, and sort of a willingness to allow people their own style, and maybe out of that it can work. But I mean, you raise a really good question about how does any community have coherence, and how does it come together, and how does it really work. I remember hearing John Savage talk to insurance people about his family and how he ran his family. And he made it very clear that in the family, I am the judge and the arbiter of the evidence and the one who decides how it's going to be carried out and so on. He was talking in relationship to his children, not in relationship to his wife. And it made a strong impact, I think, on the people who were hearing him. But I mean, it was a very clear statement here that this grouping of people is really not, we're not all equal members. I mean, I'm the father of the family, and I run it this way, and the others sort of have to figure out how they work into that framework. Well, it sounded realistic when he was saying it, and it shows a style that maybe can work in today's world as well.
And all of that just says to me that in this community, getting this task done, that authority is important and it's necessary, and that I think in our day and age we have a tendency to just sort of look negatively upon authority, maybe because of past experiences, but that authority is really a very positive thing and it needs to be there.
One thing I was reading not long ago was about that we should think of the decision-making process and not just the actual decision itself. And if you think of it that way, you can see how the group can work together better. Just drawing my own experience, I think we meet to plan our liturgy each week. We have our staff members, 7 or 8 people together to plan the liturgy, and we all read a different commentary, and then we all share ideas on what the scriptures mean to us or what we get out of the commentaries. And out of that, we're supposed to come up with a theme, and I'm the head of the liturgy. So
you've got the authority.
That's right. After we hear all of this, we got all of this input. Then I'm in a position to be able to say, well, I think the theme is this, and then if I seem to get a lot of agreement, well, then we're home free, and then everyone tries to carry this out. So the music minister works with that theme, and the person who writes the commentary sheet or the prayer of the faithful does it, and so on. We carry it out. But you see that the decision about what the focus for the liturgy that week was going to be is a process. And while one person made the final decision about what the actual focus would be, everyone else was involved in the process all the way along the line. Now, I suppose if after everyone gave their input and I said, well, it seems to me the focus is on the problem of suffering and redemption, and everyone is sitting there shaking their head and saying, well, no, that's not what I got out of it, well, then maybe we would reverse it and say, whoa, well, maybe we missed this, or let's find a different kind of focus here or something. In other words, a leader, it seems to me, would have to be responsive. I don't know how good an example that is, but it does, in my own mind, suggest that when there's a task orientation, that someone has to take hold and make sure it happens, keep some efficiency in it, and make some final decisions. But that doesn't rule the people out of the process.
And the good decision, or the one, is where it has included those people, so that you may say this is what the theme is, but you were listening and you were hearing, so that your overall theme really did take into account many of the people. And I think that's really so important, because then people feel worthwhile. They say, well, I really contributed to something. Gee, that's what I said. That was, and then I see where that can move many times, where a given group of our task, we start going to deeper levels. That may have been a moment of inspiration. Some trust factor was developed in that. And so just how important that is. And I think that's the wise leader that will do that. Also, I think it's the wise leader that, for example, had you named a theme that was incorrect and you saw everybody shaking their head, you could have blown it right then and there if you had insisted on your agenda.
Right.
And I think we see that happening with authority all over the place,
Yeah, and that's when communities then sort of dissolve or become dysfunctional and
lots of
don't
tension,
work. Yeah.
Problems, and I think many times, and yet on the other hand, maybe that's good that surfaces, because that's the call sort of that given group to look at itself when they may dissolve, or if I guess maybe moving on to the authority thing. From authority is an important component in communities. Just the great importance of dialogue. And I guess I feel most frustrated when all doors have been closed toward dialogue. And that at times does happen, and I think in community experience that the stakes or the tension get so high that, you know, the person might walk out or the person just doesn't say anything anymore, and then we have a whole other problem and another tension. But the reason is that, you know, we have refused to dialogue. And I guess when I look at those things, it's just I don't know where to go if people will just not dialogue.
Then the community life sort of comes to a standstill, doesn't it?
It does.
Let's talk a little bit more about that, Geraldine. When I think of dialogue, I guess my idea is that, well, it's conversation in which the two of us are trying to search for a truth that's greater than either one of us has at this point, and where we expect the result of the conversation to be some deeper perception of things, and that I figure I have to move a little as a result of the conversation. At the end of it, I don't expect to be in exactly the same place I was before. I might be, but my expectation is that I will learn or move or adapt or be more flexible or see it your way and crawl behind your eyes a bit in viewing the problem.
I think the key that you said there is that, you know, each of us have a truth that is greater than the both of us. And many times I think it's difficult for us because we come thinking, you know, I have the truth. And in reality, none of us has the truth. We each have a little piece of it.
Truth is larger than we are. In fact, I always think there's only one absolute truth, and that's God Himself. And that, apart from that, we all have partial glimpses of the truth. And there's a relativity about truth. And I think if we see it that way to begin with, then we are ready to move as a result of dialogue, to reach a higher standpoint where our horizons have been broadened a bit and where we see things more clearly. But I agree with you that dialogue would really be crucial to all this. And part of what you have to dialogue about, I think, is the failures of the community. We have to dialogue about where we don't agree and where we seem to have different directions going. And that's probably what's hard, because it's hard for me to say to you, well, you know, Geraldine, you and I just are on different wavelengths here, or we see this problem in a totally different way. We're going to try to prepare this liturgy for Mass, and you have a totally different perception of liturgy than I do. No wonder we disagree.
It's important for me to know that different wavelengths are okay. I'm sure that one could take the position, you're the leader, and so if you're saying different wavelengths, that sounds like you got the right one and I got the wrong one. And it's important for me to know that I don't care if you are Jim Bacik, you have yours and I have mine, and they're both okay. Yeah. And it's all right. And that's that great importance of dialogue, and and that's fine. It's that great thing of gifts differing rather than my gift is better than your gift. My wavelength is much better than your wavelength, and yet I think when we're on a wavelength, we tend to think that other people need to be on that same thing, or that if it's my gift to do something in a certain way, that I can only function when other people operate that way, and that we're never going to understand that, and unless the dialogue is there. So not only you're saying the dialogue, but for me to not feel just because you're saying it, I'm not going to fall apart, that we're on different wavelengths. So I say fine, that's okay.
Right, yes. And you need to be affirmed in that then, too. I mean, I have to respect that, and I have to show in different ways that I do respect your viewpoint, even though it's different. And maybe
that your and the great appreciation when that's done, but also my own responsibility to respect myself and to know that my wavelength is okay.
Right. That's part of what I would say is that communities are going to work to the degree that people are self-confident, that they come at it standing on their own 2 feet and not having great psychological needs for affirmation or for approval, but that you know it from within yourself that you have decent ideas and something to contribute and your own gifts that will benefit the whole community.